This activity, we are going to primarily be working with inserting functions into an Excel spreadsheet. Now, a function is very much like a formula, which previously we learned a formula is basically a math equation. And here, a function is a predefined worksheet formula that enables you to perform complex calculations easily. And these are predefined in within Excel. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and get started with this. And what we want to do is, and first of all, I want to make sure that you understand I've taken this activity from a textbook and I've modified it slightly to make it to give you more opportunities to practice. And what we're going to do is we're going to start down here in cell B12. And what we're going to do is we want to get a total of the cells directly above cell B12. And rather than having to go in and, as we did previously, we learned that all formulas start with an equal sign. And we could do it like this, where we just go through and click on each of these cells. And then what we would have to do is put in a plus sign and then click on that cell and then a plus sign and so forth and so forth. And this can be very time consuming. And if you ever find yourself thinking, well, there's got to be an easier way to do this, well, there probably is. And in this case, there absolutely is an easier way to do this. And we are going to put in a function. So what I want to do is hit the escape key to get this to go away because I didn't really want to do it. And what we're going to do is we're going to come down to this cell right here and we're going to insert a function. Now, there are many functions that are built into Excel, but some of the most common functions give you a total of cells, or they will return the smallest number from a range of cells or the largest number from a range of cells, or they'll give you the average number from a range of cells. And to access these functions, the easiest way to do so is to make sure you have clicked on your Home tab and then come over here, and on your auto sum button in the editing group you've got an arrow, and this will show you all of the functions that are available under this option. Now, this first one we want is we are trying to find the total of a range of cells, and you probably learned in about third grade that another word for the total is the sum. So a sum function in Excel will return the total of a range of cells. So what I want to do is I want to click on sum, and Excel is pretty good about guessing, hey, are these the cells that you want to include as part of your total? And in this case, Excel does correctly guess that we want to add up cells B4 through B11. So what we can do is hit the enter key on the keyboard, and when you do that, then you get a total, and in this case it's $34,824.63. All right, so we want to do the same thing over here in quarter two. So you can repeat the process and click on the auto sum arrow, and again you can click on sum. And in this case, Excel does a good job of correctly guessing, do you want to add up cells C4 through C11? And yes, we do. And again, note how these the format of this function, it starts with an equal sign, and then you've got your function name, and then you've got a left parenthesis, and then you've got the first and last cell in that range, and this range is C4 to C11. It does not span across multiple columns, but it does span across multiple rows. It could span across multiple columns and or rows, but that rarely happens in an actual situation. So again, I just want to go ahead and hit enter, and you may have already learned from previous activities that there's even easier ways to do it than this. So now what I want to do is I want to click on this cell right here that's got the sum function on it, And rather than going through the time-consuming process of doing this every time we need a sum function, what I want to do is to click on this cell where it's got the sum function already in there, and then I want to drag my fill handle over, and I got to first move my mouse so that the arrow becomes a crosshair, a black crosshair. I want to click, hold, and drag, and I actually want to drag this through column F, cell F12. Now look what happens when I do that. I'm going to let this go, and notice that in cell F12 I get a dash in that cell, and what that means is that this cell has nothing in it, because if you were to double click on this cell right now, it's trying to get a total of the cells directly above it. Well, the cells directly above it are all empty, meaning they are 0. And the reason that this has got a dash in it, and by the way, I'm going to go ahead and hit escape on my keyboard, is because the current number formatting of this worksheet is accounting, and when you use the accounting number format style, rather than having the number 0, you have a dash. Now, when these cells are populated, which we're getting ready to do, we're going to end up, and this number will automatically recalculate, and you'll see an updated number. So what I want to do is I want to come up here and click in this cell, and again, I want to just click on the auto sum button, because by default when you click this button it gives you the sum function. Now again, like we did earlier, if we wanted one of these other functions, we would click the arrow, but we want the sum, so all we got to do is to click on the button itself, and this time Excel correctly guesses that we want to add up the range B4 through E4. So this is correct, and again, note the syntax of this function starts with an equals, and you got the word sum, and then again you got a left parentheses, and then you got your range, then you got a right parentheses. And notice that the two cells, that the range, the first cell and the last cell, they're separated by colon. And you could type all of this out, but probably at this stage you may not be ready to do that. So anyway, I just hit the enter key on my keyboard, and I get a total right here. And note when I get a total here that this number automatically recalculates from a value of 0, but it now equals this cell's content value, because all of these other cells for the moment are still 0. So like I did last time, I could take my mouse and move my mouse so that my arrow becomes a crosshair, and that I am on the fill handle in the lower right corner of this cell, and I want to click, hold, and drag down through row 11. And when I do that, notice how these automatically populate with their correct number, and then down here in this corner you get a total of 149, 766, 92. Now, if you want to verify that all of these numbers are correct, you could, by doing a sum function of these cells right here. And let me see if something else that I don't think you can do. Actually, you can do it in the online version, which is a little surprising. Notice how I select these cells right here. But then look down here toward the bottom of my screen, and you see right here you've got a sum of 149, 766, 92, which is equal to the cell right here. So again, you know all of these numbers match. And that's just a way of checking your work. And also notice down here you've got a count of 4. That is basically just telling us how many cells that we have got selected at the moment. But also notice how we have an average of 37,441.73. So you do get a preview of some basic functions down here based upon the cells that you've got selected. All right, so the next thing we want to do is, what if we decide we want to see what would happen to these numbers if they increase or decrease by 20%. And you only want to see the totals. So basically what we want to do is we want to create totals. We want to create just basic formulas in the cells right here underneath this yellow box right here, and then also to the right out here. We want to see what would happen if these numbers increased or decreased by whatever number that we've indicated. Now, what I've done in this activity, notice how when I click on this cell right here and I look up in the formula bar, it says 20%. And this is cell H2. Now look what happens when I click down in this cell that's yellow. It says equals H2. And what that's going to do is whatever number I put in this cell right here, it's going to automatically populate down here in this cell. So what I want to do is I want to see what would happen if these totals increased by 20%. And what we're going to do is we're going to think back to probably 5th grade math, and we're going to have to think about PEMDAS. And what we're going to do is we're going to put a formula in this cell, and all formulas start with the equal sign, so we're going to put in an equal sign. Didn't mean to do that. Let's try this again. All formulas start with an equal sign. And first of all, we're going to have to do an equation where we multiply the total times the content of this cell right here. So PEMDAS, the first letter P, stands for parenthesis. We're going to have to put a parenthesis in here. And what we want to do is we want to multiply this cell right here. And we want to multiply it times the contents of this cell right here. Now, one of the things I'm going to go ahead and tell you that we're going to have to do, and I think we did this in a previous activity, is we're going to have to add an absolute reference to the H and the 2, which means we're going to put a $ in front of the H and the 2. And the easy way that you could do this is to hit the function 4 key on your keyboard. It should be on the top row of your keyboard, and you have to do it while your insertion point is blinking with this. In this case, you can see it's blinking red, and the current cell that is selected is H2. So if I hit the function 4 key on my keyboard, it'll automatically add a $ to the column letter and the row number. And that is an absolute reference. It means that when we copy this formula either down or across, it's always going to read H2 instead of automatically updating like it will for a cell reference that does not have an absolute reference on it. So now we got to put in a right parenthesis. Note that you always must have the same number of left and right parentheses inside a formula or a function. So in this case, we've got one of each. And so basically what we're doing is we're taking the contents of cell F4 and we're multiplying it by the contents of cell H2. And that is the first part of the equation. And now we've got to add back in the original final total. So then we would want to come back here and click on F4 again, or you could have just typed in the letters F4 on your keyboard. And the more used to this that you get, you actually find it's easier for you to go and type in F4 or whatever the cell address is. So now you can hit enter, and you see that you've got a total of 30,818.24. And as you have learned previously, we can click on this cell and take our mouse and move it so that the arrow becomes a crosshair, and we want to drag this down through, I want to go through row 11. And so basically what this means is you see what all of these totals would be if they were all increased by 20%. Now, in reality, I'm not quite sure if this is the way that I would set up this worksheet. I would probably want to know, because right now this is essentially information about Australia. You would probably want to know what would Australia's have to do in each of these quarters to increase these. Quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3. Here you're just looking at the overall total. So again, I'm trying to teach you Excel, but at the same time, note this may not be the way you would exactly set up this worksheet. So now what we're going to do is we are going to, down here, we want to find the same information, but we want to determine it by quarter, where up here all of our information is going straight across and we're finding it out per country. Here we want to find it out by quarter. So what we're going to have to do, again, we're going to put a function in here, put an equal sign. And again, we're going to have to use PEMDAS, and we're only taking in consideration the total. So we want the total. And this is one of those great things where math, the order of operations doesn't really matter. So I didn't put in parentheses on this one, that's fine, but I'm going to put in a plus sign. And then I got to put in a parentheses because, again, the order of operations in math class, it goes left to right in order, and P is the first one, parentheses. So the first calculation is going to be done is contents of cell B12, and then it's going to be times. And really, you could either select this yellow cell or that yellow cell because you're going to get the same number. And actually in this case it does matter actually because this says A15. If you wanted to see a different increase or decrease, which would kind of defeat the purpose of doing this activity this way, you could put a different number in here, and if you did that, again, you would need an absolute reference on this cell right here. And again, I just hit the function 4 key on the keyboard, and then I put in a right parenthesis, and I'm going to hit enter. And when I copy this across, the A15 is going to always read A15, while the two B12s will change by column letter as I copy it across. So again, I want to take my mouse and move it so that my arrow is on top of this fill handle, and I want to drag it across through the quarter 4 info, and then I get my data that tells me what would an increase of 20% look like per quarter. And earlier I was talking about, I'm not quite sure if this is the way that I would set up this worksheet. Same thing still is true, but again, I'm just trying to teach you Excel more so than how to set up a spreadsheet and how to look at the data that you may be wanting to look at. All right, so the next thing that we're going to do, we're going to click down here in cell B16, and now we want to find the average for each of these countries during each of the quarters. And this is where you've got to be careful. Now, previously, we came over here and I clicked on this button under the Home tab and clicked on the arrow next to AutoSum, and you may have noticed then that you've got some other options here like average, min, and max. Well, here we want the average, but remember I told you that Excel does a pretty good job of guessing what cells that you want to actually include in your function. So look what happens when I click average right here. It asks, do you want the average of this cell? Well, there's only one cell. So in this case, Excel does not do a good job of guessing. And there's a couple different ways that we can go about doing this, but basically we want to find the average of B4 through B12. So what you could do is on your keyboard, you could type in B4, and it's not case sensitive, but notice what happens when I put in the 4. It turns blue because B4 is a valid cell address. And then I put in a colon, and then I put in B12, and I just type that on my keyboard. And then that is the range of cells for which we want the average. Now, actually, I said B12. That should actually be B11. That's why you should always be careful and look twice before you hit enter. And now, this is correct. This is what I want. You don't want to include B12 because you would be including the total as part of this range, and that's not what you want. So you hit enter now, and then you get an average of 435308. Now, what you can do, you can click on this cell right here, and just like we did with the sum, you can move your mouse so that your arrow becomes a crosshair on top of the fill handle, and you could drag it through here, and then you get the average of the cells in each column that are in cell rows 4 through 12, or row 4 through 11. So let me just double click on this cell, and when I do, notice that it highlights in blue the cell range that is part of this formula, and it makes it easier to actually see it and to verify that you've got the correct cell selected. And I can do that on each of these, and again, you see that these are indeed the cells that you want included. So then you'd want to come down here, and for the maximum, you would want to do the same thing. Again, you go under the Home tab, go under the Editing Group, and click the arrow next to your AutoSum button. And when you do that, now we want to find the maximum. And the maximum or the highest number. Now, sometimes on my lessons, what I'll do is down here, instead of labeling this as maximum or minimum, I will label them as highest or smallest, or highest or lowest. And part of the reasons why I do that is because I want you to get used to having to recognize if on a certification exam, that's how they would phrase it. They're not going to tell you to use the max function. They're going to tell you to use a function that returns the highest number from a range of cells. Now, in this case, when I click max, it's asking, do you want to use the range B15 to B16? Well, no, that's not correct. What we want to do is we want to include, again, B4 through B11. Now, you could either do what we did last time and type in B4 colon B11, or you can use your mouse and click and hold and drag to select through B4 to B11. Now, if you do it like that, you got to be careful to make sure that the tip of your arrow is in the middle of a cell before you click, hold, and drag. That makes it a whole lot easier. So now I just want to hit the enter key on the keyboard, and I get a maximum of 7195.06. And again, if I were to look up here, the largest number is 7195.06. And like previous instances, we want to click on this cell. We want to drag this fill handle across, and it shows us what our maximum or what our largest number is for each of these quarters. And according to this example, the largest number for each of these, they're all in the United States. All right, so now the minimum. Again, you would come up clicking this cell, and you could go up under the AutoSum button and then click the arrow that's next to that. And this time we want to find the minimum. So we would select min. And then this time again, we want what's in B4 through B11. So again, you could click, hold, and drag, or you could just type it in. And again, I want you to understand, as you get further along in learning Excel, you may find out that typing in a cell range or a named range will be much quicker than having to click, hold, and drag. Right now, this activity is pretty small, and because of that, it's a pretty short activity. There's not a lot of data, so it may be easier just to click, hold, and drag. But the further along you get in Excel, you may find out that it's easier to use other methods. So again, I want to hit the enter key because I've got the correct range in here now. I hit enter. And now I want to click on this cell. Move my mouse so that my arrow becomes a crosshair. It won't become a crosshair until you are on top of that fill handle. And then you will drag this across. And then when you do that, you will see what your smallest number for each quarter is in here. And if you wanted to quickly, I'll tell you now, if you wanted to quickly be able to find out which country each of these was, there's additional formulas or functions that you could put in to make this happen into this spreadsheet, but I'm certainly not going to subject you to that at this point because those are all expert level skills. So now if I wanted to see what would happen if the increase was not by 20% but by 25%, I could come up to this yellow cell in H2 and type in 25 and hit enter. And then when I do that, you're going to see all of these numbers over here automatically update. and then you're going to see the numbers for the quarters automatically update as well. What would happen if you had a decrease in sales? What if you lost 10%? Well, what you would do is put in a minus 10% and you hit enter, and then you'd see how all of these numbers get smaller. And because of how I set up this worksheet, whatever I type in cell H2, it automatically shows up here in A15. Again, if you look up here in the formula bar, it references whatever's in cell H2. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and put this back in here and make it 20% because that's what we started with. And that is the end of this activity. If the next activity is already posted, you are welcome to move on, but you are not required to do so.